Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Digital Power Peer Assessment Program Project Showcase for cohort number 3 in our second training phase. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Stacy Erdman, and I'm serving as the project director on this grant. So our peer assessment program is generously funded by an IMLS Laura Bush 21st Century Librarian Grant, and we're currently wrapping up phase 2 of the project with our second 3 cohorts nearing the end of their work. And these cohorts have spent a year getting to know one another and supporting each other as they've learned about and completed different digital preservation assessments, including the NDSA Levels, the DPC RAM, and the NEDCC's peer assessment framework. They will share some of the highlights of that work with you today. And this marks our final project showcase for the grant. So if you're interested in the other showcase events that have taken place, either during this phase or the first phase, you'll be able to watch them on the Digital Power YouTube channel. And I'll paste the link into the chat in a minute here. So we will be adding the showcases for the phase 2 groups probably tomorrow. So I will get you that link. And the project and the grant will be drawing to an end this summer with the publication of a white paper and a volume of case studies written by all of the project participants. So be on the lookout for that later this year. But for now, I'm going to introduce our amazing cohort facilitator for cohort 3, Danielle Taylor.
Thank you, Stacy, and thanks for that introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Danielle Taylor. I'm the Digital Preservation Librarian at Indiana University, and it's really nice to see some familiar names on this chat. I am so delighted, but also a little bit sad that our cohort has ended. I had the very great pleasure of facilitating this group this past year. We did have 6. We had to have someone who dropped out for circumstances beyond her control, but we had a really amazing group. This one was picked strategically because they're at much smaller institutions, public libraries, some historical societies, where people wear a lot of different hats. We're called to different attentions every day. Even today, someone might have to go onto the reference desk. That's how much time, I think, shows that they have very little time dedicated to digital preservation. And it's probably been something that's thrust upon them. And especially if you're at a smaller institution, it's the same way. And I was just so incredibly thrilled with the passion that this group brought to the project, the questions, and it just felt like such a fun time to get together. It was very overwhelming in the beginning to do all those assessments to get over that hump, but I think once I could see it click, and it was just so much fun to see that and see the passion that they brought. I felt like I barely had to do anything because they just were so self-directed and really got to know each other really well. And I'm very excited to hear their presentations, and I hope you enjoy them today. So I'm going to be doing this by how they were paired in groups. And so today I'm going to start with Sara Bennett so that she can kick off our amazing meeting. So go ahead, Sara, and take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Danielle. Before I get started, I have a couple of slides. I just want to say thank you to Danielle and Amber and the rest of our cohort. This has been like totally a job transforming year. And I really appreciate just how supportive and kind everyone's been throughout the process and how we've had just such open lines of communication and a safe place for asking questions. And as a newbie and one of those people Danielle mentioned who this was thrust upon as part of their job, this is a total game changer. All right, I will share my screen, put my slides up. Okay, are you seeing them?
Yes.
Yes.
Are they full screen?
No. Go ahead.
Oh, no. Okay.
Yeah, you can hit the present.
Okay. Is that good? All right. Let's
Yep.
see if I can get my little notes screen up. Maybe. Okay, I'm gonna try and do it without my notes then. Sorry. Okay. So Hi, my name is Sara. I am one of the archives librarians at the Champaign County Historical Archives. We are a department of the Urbana Free Library. Besides myself, there are 2 other full-time employees, another person with my same job, and our manager. And then we have 3 part-time staff who mainly staff our reference desk and work with patrons. And we're in Urbana, Illinois. So I just want to start off the presentation by just noting a couple surprises that came out of the evaluation processes. By far, our most funny and best and most staff loved find was a VHS of a 1985 Pizza Hut commercial introducing the calzone. I have a link here. I can throw it in the chat at the end if anyone's curious about watching it. It's pretty hilarious. And it left us with more questions than answers. Like, I think many archival tasks just open up a can of worms. Like, why do we have this? We don't know. There was no documentation. So I think someone just recorded it and donated it a very long time ago. Anyway, that was one things we got a good chuckle out of while ingesting material. And then our least favorite surprise was during the evaluation process and in conversations with Amber, I discovered that the server we were keeping all of our digital preservation files on didn't keep original copies. Every time it backs up, it rewrites. So that became our number one kind of our big priority to try and remediate throughout this process. Okay, Snowden says in the chat, the introduction of the calzone is deeply meaningful and historic. Absolutely, I don't disagree. But to the history of Champaign County, I don't know. I guess it's kind of universal, but all right. Okay. So I'm just going to go over some of the big picture changes that have happened as a result of the past year. Most notably our workflow. When I began doing this work a few years ago, I started just overseeing some practicum students who were ingesting material and creating metadata records for them. We had a pretty big, pretty cumbersome and often confusing to interpret workflow document with instructions. It was written by someone no longer on staff, and it wasn't really doable for someone at a beginner level. So I started by just pulling out kind of key pieces of it and streamlining them and evaluating what parts can we do effectively, what's working, and what do we need to pause on and reevaluate. One of the big steps we talked about over the year was starting an inventory. So I had a digital preservation practicum student in the fall who worked on a pretty hefty inventory for us. And that was really helpful, just getting a handle on what's where. And they also evaluated, does this need digital preservation, or is this just a handy digitized file to have? Kind of what's working out. Other big changes was the workstation that we do our digital preservation on. We worked with IT to kind of relocate a computer to our office space and install a clean computer switch so we can have volunteers work on projects during most of the week on the station. And then when we need to do digital preservation, there's just this handy little button that disconnects it from the network, and then we can use it to ingest material safely. So that's been a big improvement. I also spent some time wandering the stacks and all of our various spaces, gathering a lot of digitization accessories, kind of figuring what we had. and getting organized. And I've got some photos of our space later on. So in addition to all those kind of workflow streamlining efforts, I kind of, in discussions with Danielle, decided to pause our use of Bit Curator. It's a little over our pay grade right now, and we couldn't determine what it was being used for in the past. It seemed like we got it, it was paid for, but no one had yet put it into practice. So we just decided to pause, take a step back, and focus on those next best steps instead of perfect everything everywhere all the time. We also paused creating metadata records because we had nowhere that we were putting them. So in addition to not having them be uploaded anywhere, we also, in the past, prior to me, had been creating tons of metadata records for almost duplicate images at an item level that I'm not sure we're going to need for the subset of materials that will eventually get full digital preservation for just digitized material. So we paused on that. Some things we added were Terracopy, so that we could copy and paste our files, move them where we wanted them without editing them, data accessioner, and then we also just added text files to our ingested folders with brief descriptions of if we knew accession info, we would put that there, as well as who ingested the material when they did it, if they noticed any issues or anything of particular importance. And a lot of that material also was included in the inventory, but since we're in the process of getting a lot of disparate records cleaned up, it felt nice to just have that both places. The other big thing from this year was just setting priorities and getting organized. Again, what do we have that's just digitized for access, and what do we need to do full preservation for? So these are just, I took a lot of photos of our space. So let me go to this one. This is how a lot of the material I found when I kind of just walked our storage to find, loose floppies and things. A lot of it was just in random boxes and piles without a lot of context. We were lucky if something was labeled and we could connect it to an existing physical collection. Sometimes that wasn't the case. And then this is what it looks like now. So everything got rehoused. I'm an archivist, so I love labels. So we've separated them out into to do, in progress, and fully ingested. So pretty straightforward, but was a big jump in organization for us here. And then inside of the boxes, we just have a naming schema that mirrors our digital preservation files on the computer, and then accession number when we have it. Unfortunately, a lot of them were just found, and we don't have any information about donation. Okay, and then this is our setup. On the left is the set of shelves that I commandeered in our office for all of our digital preservation material. So it started to work out well, because instead of just dropping random floppies on my desk that people find places, they've started putting it on the to-do area and letting me know. So it's kind of helped pre-process a little bit. And then on the right is our new station setup. You can see we have like VHS and CD and DVD converters and tape converters. And we have our little floppy disk converters in the drawers. So that's our setup. All right. And then the next steps, what I'm planning on doing, this next year and in the future, and something, we talked about a lot this year was relying on strong policies and procedures. So some have been started, and that's kind of a high priority to get those set, and then expand our inventory. This year, I just focused on a subset of material, and we do have other kind of larger chunks of our collection that we'll need to make decisions about, but for the purpose of a doable chunk for this first time, for this first year, I didn't focus on everything because that would have been a little difficult. So one of our major changes is I've worked with IT to get cloud storage set up, and in a way that when it backs up, it won't rewrite the files like our current server does. So that should be implemented. Hopefully in the next few months, we can start doing that. And then we also don't currently have a system for accessing any of the digital preservation materials. So some of the materials, if they came from a physical collection, we might have a note in the finding aid that, you know, some materials have been removed, they're in digital collection number 1 or something. But some we don't have, they don't have a corresponding physical collection. So I'm hoping to get a practicum student in the fall to create finding aids for some of these collections, just to make them findable. Hopefully somewhere down the line we can get, you know, a better access system than that, but that's working with what our catalog is now and kind of a doable way to provide access. All right, that's all I've got. If there's anything I didn't cover, I'm happy to answer any questions. So.
Thank you so much, Sara. We might leave questions towards the end. I do know there is a chance that Sara has to walk off for reference duty, but I really, actually, before I introduce Amber, I think it's a really important point to note. I think Sara did a great job of pointing out that at these smaller institutions, especially like historical archives within a public library setting, this funding from the grant was hugely important to get this started because now this computer equipment is part of the budget process and it will not go away now. So this, even those little bit of startup funds are so hugely critical. And it was really fun to see how overwhelmed people felt in the beginning, and then seeing that that confidence, like Sara exudes that confidence. So I think that's a really, she kind of showed that as well. So thank you, Sara.
Danielle, can I add a little anecdote too?
Yes, please. Absolutely.
So this morning, my coworkers and I met with a concerned donor group who didn't understand what we were doing with their collection, and they had a lot of questions about digitization. And so I was able to share kind of what we would do with digital digitization and digital preservation to them. And I felt like I knew what I was telling them, and it was really nice. And that wouldn't have happened last year. So yeah.
I love it. It's so wonderful. Thank you, Sara. Her partner is Amber Passen, and I will pass it off to Amber to introduce themselves. So take it away, Amber.
Hi, my name is Amber Passen. I'm the digital archivist at the Columbus, Indiana Architectural Archives. I do use she, they pronouns. So thank you, Danielle. And then I will go ahead and share my screen for my slides. Let's go ahead and make it. You can do it, computer. I believe in you. Okay. So like I said, my name is Amber Passen. I'm the digital archivist at Columbus, Indiana Architectural Archives. I started at the beginning of 2023, end of 2022, and was hired by the library to implement the first ever digital preservation program they had there. I started with a background in archaeology and anthropology and sidestepped into archives. So I kind of come from a little bit of a weird background. The Columbus, Indiana Architectural Archives themselves are part of a public library. The library was first established in 1899. I'll explain why I'm starting there in a second. And then we opened the current building in 1969, and that's kind of where the archives is housed. We collect material documenting the design and construction process of Columbus, Indiana. We have about 30,000 architectural drawings, 260 linear feet of documents, a few thousand photos, and some architectural models. So how did we end up at a place in which we felt like we needed digital power? Why are we the way we are? And that would be the weird little history of Columbus, Indiana. So in 1967, somebody goes, hey, maybe we should collect stuff on architecture because it's really important to this weird little Midwestern town. An unknown collection of materials ends up in the newly created Cleo Rogers Memorial Library. No one knows what was in it. Nobody owned it. People were allowed to just put stuff in it, take stuff out, do what they wanted. It was kind of manned on a volunteer basis through the 70s and 90s. And like Danielle said earlier, volunteers are nice, not professional experience. So there's not a lot of notes during that process. And then that kind of goes that way up until my boss starts in 2014. So in 2004, somebody turns CIA into a nonprofit organization that can't sustain itself, but they try. So in 2014, they hire their first professional archivist. So from 69 to 2014, no professional hands on any of this material. When she started, there was no functional email. There was a single desktop, an ancient laptop that could scan, but the scans couldn't go anywhere. And storage consisted of 6 external hard drives. And then due to external pressure from the board and the need to demonstrate the value of the archives, Trisha, my boss, was just pushed to digitize for access and exhibits. She wasn't given the permission or time to process, to do any kind of digital preservation on the digital surrogates that were created. And so through that process, by the time I start, there are 103,000 digital objects that are completely unmanaged. They've just been created, shoved in 6 external hard drives, and ignored. In 2018, CAA becomes part of the public library. We get actual network drives, a laptop that works, IT support, and support from the administration to actually start doing archiving and not just hoarding. I start in 2013. In 2023. And when I got there, the digital collection material was spread across 9 disparate drives, a personal laptop, some of the hard drives, hadn't all made it on the network drives. And I whittled down those 103,000 to about 30,000 digital surrogates that needed to be managed, and they had little to no metadata or administrative information of any kind. So when digital power came around and I heard about it, it was exactly what we needed when we needed it. And the goals and outline of the program aligned perfectly with everything that I looked at and thought I needed to do in 2024 to try to get this archive somewhere. But I am a fresh graduate. It's my first job. I had no idea what to do. And so digital power was kind of the savior in that moment to help guide me into that process in my first professional job. I found the most helpful portions to be the resources and education. You can do theory all day long in school. That is just not the same as having somebody as knowledgeable as Danielle point you in the right direction and say, this is where you should kind of start. The assessments, like Sara mentioned, were life-changing. It completely changed the professional atmosphere and the job as I got to finally understand how to evaluate, which they don't teach you in school enough of how to come into a messy space, the reality of archives, and evaluate where it is and where you want to take it. The Walk the Workflow module was phenomenal for getting into that nitty-gritty, what do I do on a daily basis? Because you can have the education, you can do the assessment. And then Sara and I definitely felt it during the peer assessment a couple times. We'd look at what we just learned and we went, okay, but what do I do about that? Like, cool, I see it's a problem. I don't know where to go from here. And then the policy writing resources. They completely don't cover that in school, or at least not in mine. And they're incredibly helpful to have policies to point at both internally with administration and externally with our patrons and our partners. And so having the Digital Power program to assist in which policies to write and how to write them was really life-changing. Just for fun, I have the NDSA Level 1 assessment at the beginning of the program and where we kind of ended thanks to the Digital Power program. And I think it's an astronomical change, at least to us, that we were able to understand our storage environment thanks to conversations with Danielle and especially with Sara, understanding like where IT was doing. We both found out the hard way that we did not have proper backups. So that was fun to find out our storage environment wasn't what we wanted it to be. Thanks to the Digital POWRR program, I was also able to conduct these assessments, and that allowed us to campaign to get a grant, to get a grant run, a grant funded position, because before it was just me and my boss. And thanks to the assessments and then money to get the proper hardware and a computer, we were able to get a third staff member. And I don't think that would have happened without the Digital POWRR program. The framework, doing the NEDCC Digital Preservation Peer Assessment Framework with Sara, has to be one of my favorite parts. We spent about 2 months meeting almost every week to get this really hyper-focused, one-on-one, thorough examination of our institutions from both an external viewpoint, but also somebody in a very similar situation. So we kind of understood our own limitations and our differences and could look at each other's repositories and kind of figure out where to go, who to talk to, and what we could change. At smaller institutions like us, like I said, Walk the Workflow was a priceless resource. Between the peer assessment and the Walk the Workflow and talking to Sara, we were able to come up with, what is the next thing I'm going to do? What is the actual next step? Let's not do Bit Curator. Let's do TerraCopy. What am I going to implement? Her and I talked a lot from being in public libraries about, like, do I make an oxygen record right now? Or is that in the future and not something for me to worry about at the moment? The assessment and educational modules allowed us to have a high priority collection list that we were able to give to the grant funded person to make a very actionable plan for 2024 and now into 2025 on what we're going to focus on and what we're going to get into long-term preservation areas like Indiana Memory and IndiePres. Not as applicable, I would say, in this was the business case toolkit for our small cohort. We don't even have a formalized budget at BCPL, so making some kind of business case toolkit report, there's nobody to give that report to. And so it wasn't the most useful part of the program, but as it was already a very unique set in the program, Danielle was able to pivot immediately and kind of change the program in like a flip of a moment into something that would be more useful for us to talk about for our little size. So thank you to Sara, and thank you to Danielle, and thank you to everybody in the cohort and in Digital POWRR. It has absolutely changed CIAA for the better. And thanks to these assessments and those reports, I'm happy to confirm as of last week, we get to keep our grant funded position for another 6 months. Thanks to the assessments and stealing from my power plan and sending that to the board, we were able to argue that they should totally fund her for another 6 months because we were running out of our grant. So thank you guys. You've really changed my life for the next 6 months. I didn't know what I was going to do when I lost her. So thank you.
Oh, thanks, Amber, and thanks, Sara. That was really wonderful. Amazing progress. Yes, a lot of I'm loving the comments in this section. But I do want to point out what Stacy emphasized, that this is phenomenal progress to be able to do this. It might seem small and very daunting to take a larger look, but this is actually phenomenal progress, and this is what digital preservation really is on the boots on the ground. So I really want to emphasize that. So great job, both of you. All right, I'm going to introduce our next pair, Kristin Pearson and Joyce Homan. Kristin's on camera, so I'm going to pick on you if you are ready to go next, Kristin.
I guess I am. I am working on 2 screens here so that I can actually maybe look at some of my notes, but I am a very visual person, so I have a lot of pictures. I hope you enjoy them. Sorry, I gotta get. Okay. So yes, I'm ready, but not 100% ready because I have to get to the present full screen and share my screen.
Just realized after seeing all of your guys' collections, I should have had you been sharing them in our cohort meetings this whole time. They're phenomenal.
I'm sorry, I do not know where all my screens are here. Okay.
Do you need another minute? I can have.
Let me try sharing. Okay, if I share my screen, do you see me now? Or do you see the Bristol Public Library? Okay. And then I'm I'm going to now switch to this present
Hooray.
screen. Yeah, this morning as I tried to set everything up, our reference laptop, which I was going to use for my notes, it said, "Oh, you don't, your time and date does not match." And I went, but anyway, I have a different laptop and I am all good. Okay, so as Danielle said, I am Kristin Pearson and I work at the Bristol Public Library in Bristol, Virginia. We are actually a two-state library system because we are literally 250 feet north of the Tennessee state line. So we have a library in Virginia and we have a library in Tennessee. So that makes us a little bit of a unique place, I think. And okay, sorry, I'm getting there. So basically, the Bristol Public Library has been around since 1929. In the early 1900s, there was a group of society women who felt that they knew best for everyone. And they wanted to have a public library, which I think we can all agree is an awesome idea. And so in 1909, they actually formed the Bristol Library Association, and they did maintain spaces where books could be read and borrowed, such as the local YWCA. Couple of decades on, in 1929, they had a house on Anderson Street in Bristol, Tennessee, which did become the first library building. And it was co-owned and operated by both cities. And if you are aware of any cities like this, there are always things that are hard to work with because one place wants to do it one way and one the other. So it was a really big thing that the library was the first co-owned and operated thing. By the early 1960s, that library was they were really outgrowing their space, and they built a new one-story library here at our current location in Bristol, Virginia. And then fast forward a few decades, early 2000s, they decided they had to expand it. They actually built down the hill. We're built on a hill, so we have entrances up top and down below. And the current building was expanded to the current size of 45,000 feet in 2006. So very simply put, our mission statement is expanding minds and building community. And that's an actual image of State Street, Bristol, Virginia, and Tennessee, where we have little plates in the middle. It's a fun place. All right, so we are also part of the Organization of Watauga Libraries. It's a consortium where we share our resources. It is made up of Bristol, Virginia, and Tennessee, and several counties in Northeast Tennessee. So it's Carter County, Greene County, Johnson, Sullivan, Unicoi, and Washington, and then, like I said, plus the cities. So we can borrow items from each other and lend items. Here we are, right in the middle, as Tennessee and Virginia come together. It's a very unique little space. The Tennessee state libraries are divided into these different regions, and we are in the Holston River region. So all of those counties which were mentioned as part of OWL, or the Organization of Watauga Libraries, plus these other 4 counties over on the western side. So we are definitely a very unique library system because we serve both cities and both states. We get our funding from a lot of different sources. The fiscal year budget is there. I have it listed $2,376,034. But our funding sources include the city of Bristol, Virginia, the state of Virginia, the city of Bristol, Tennessee, Sullivan County, Tennessee, the Holston River Regional Library through the Tennessee state, and federal grants are funneled through that, and also library generated funds. With all that said, onto the digital preservation, which is why we're all here. There's no specific budget at our library for digital preservation. So at this point, it's only been managed through cooperation with the Library of Virginia, or through grants from the Tennessee State Library and Archives. We've had a couple of grants through them, which is actually a re-grant opportunity from the National Archives, the National Historical Publications and Records Commission. So brief little thing with our organization chart there. And here is the library staff. I told you I was very visual and like to have pictures. And we have 31 human staff, 23 full-time, 8 part-time, and Wobbles down here on the bottom right. He is our courtyard cat, and we love him very much, but he doesn't actually do any work. I'm going to go back for a second. The library does answer to the Board of Trustees, but we also have connections and have to answer to the city of Bristol, Virginia, and Bristol, Tennessee. We also have a foundation board, which is not so much somebody that we answer to, but they do provide funding. So this is one of the things the library board has helped with. It's not a bookmobile. We cannot call it that. It is an outreach vehicle, which we received a $50,000 grant from T-Mobile to create some sort of mobile minds library. And we just call it the BPL Roadshow because we can take books, programs, maker spaces, issue library cards. We can take it out into the community, and we have done that. We've been in parades, we've been at festivals. Bristol's really big with music festivals. So anyway, it is a unique place, and this is something the foundation also provided part of the funding for this. All right, moving on to our IT support. Our IT support is outsourced to an external company called Tech Eagles. And when we need technical assistance, we call them or we submit a help ticket by email. It has been a real challenge to work with this external company because we don't have anybody in the building all the time. And we're all pretty good at figuring things out ourselves and calling for help, but we don't have somebody else, somebody right here. Previously, this company did have one company assigned only to us, but they moved away from that, and now we get who we call. We've been using this company for at least the last 10 years, but other options are being explored for when this current year contract ends. So that just lays a little bit of the groundwork for the tech support that we are doing our best to get. Really briefly, these are some of the resources that we provide through the library. Because we are funded by Virginia and Tennessee, we have a lot of resources from both, a lot of databases through Find at Virginia and Tennessee Electronic Library, or TEL, down there in the right-hand corner. I specialize in genealogy and local history, although I am at the reference desk. I'm part of a 4-person reference staff, and therefore on the desk a lot, as a lot of my cohort. You all have most of you have those responsibilities too. These are just a few of the genealogy electronic resources we have. The ones that I have been more involved in preparing and disseminating out here would be the city directories. We actually digitized the city directories from 1896-97 up through 1944 back in 2019-20, and that was through another grant with TSLA. And then also the school yearbook collection. Right around 2016, we were able to digitize some through the Library of Virginia. They are accessible through, they are housed at archive.org and accessible for anyone. And this year I was able to send 72 more to be digitized to their scanning center. So we have 139, and I'm really excited about that. All right. As a public library, part of what we also want to do is help our patrons with their own personal digital preservation. So I threw in a couple things that we have in our library of things that we loan out. And this the VidBox thing is awesome to be able to convert old VHS tapes um, to a hard drive, and people love that. So, and also we have a scanner. Just something that we do try to provide. All right, so why did I turn to POWRR? How did I learn about POWRR? I feel like you all know that POWRR is pretty awesome, or the power of POWRR if we want to be really silly there. But I first learned about it through an email forwarded from a Virginia Libraries listserv. And the library had been thinking about providing remote access to our local history and genealogy resources for about 10 years now. And we have mainly focused on local school yearbooks and city directories, those things I just mentioned. We did digitize those early city directories about 5 years ago. When we did, with a lot of trial and error and a lot of things I learned not to do, some of my coworkers and I actually did some of the digitization in-house, and we also had an outside scanning contractor, and we imaged over 9,000 pages in 23 city directories. So unfortunately, because there were multiple people doing this, the file quality varied, and our attempts at file management, which we didn't really have a good grasp on, we tried really hard, but they were definitely not up to the standards of the digital preservation community. So POWRR seemed like a really good chance to learn this, and I feel like I have learned a lot, and we're moving forward. Our collection overview. This is just a brief shot of our tiny archives room. We're not a big archives. We simply are a public library, and we have certain valuable things we want to preserve, and we want to make them available digitally to the public. So the city directories are locally stored on a server, and they're backed up on a computer hard drive and an external hard drive. Some of our other significant collections that we are still working on processing and making available would be some of our maps, local history and family files, genealogy-wise. Also, one of the good things I've been able to use to get the administration to buy in is talking about the library board minutes and the library audits, which stretch back several decades. The board minutes all the way back to 1929, and the audits back to the 1960s. So that has helped the things we learned about how to get administration to buy in on it. We definitely used that. Just a quick shot of the first page, the very first library board minutes, and a map over there too. We have a lot of unique maps, and we actually had a donation recently where we got a lot more. So I'm working on prioritizing digitizing some of those as part of the TSLA grant that we have for this year for 2024-2025. As far as where we keep things, well, here's our server room. I don't go in the server room often because that's IT's department, but I snuck in to take a picture. The shared drives that we have a common data drive, which can be accessed from any staff computer in the building. And we also have a reference drive, which is accessible only from the reference staff and a few select other trusted staff computers. And that is, we do use our website for people to be able to access the city directories I've mentioned repeatedly. Like I said, 1896 to 1944, and we are on track to digitize the next couple this year. Here is our new ingest station. which this is the computer where the hard drive acts as another backup for most of the files that we are keeping on site. The scanner here was something that we were able to get funding from TSLA to purchase the scanner and to hire a part-time person to help scan some more things. And this station here, the computer station, is supposed to be acting as a clean machine. And we used the Digital POWRR Tech Startup funds for that. So we do have a lot of things that were found stored on floppy drives and flash drives and various people's computers. And we're really working hard on not having people store things only on their own computers, which you all know how that is. Okay. Just another photo because I love the scanner. It's really a great thing. And Joyce, my partner in this, they have been working with one of these as well. Our newspapers from 2018 forward have been, they are made available through Newsbank, which it is difficult to depend on that external service, but this is what we have. If we ever discontinue the service, or if the newspaper ever stops publishing, which is possible, we're down to 3 days a week now. We will receive a hard drive with everything that they have imaged for us. And so we would then be responsible for providing access to that. This is the interface, the access to our yearbooks on archive.org. Like I said, 139, and we did 72 of those this year. I'm really, really proud of getting that done. With that being said, what we have stored in our digital collection is not huge. I estimated in January of 2024 it was less than 200 gigabytes, and it probably still is. So we don't have a lot, but we are adding digital objects, but not in a large enough number that we've outgrown our local storage capacity, which I suppose is a good thing. But we are definitely working on preserving things. We do have a lot of microfilm. People use this to access the newspaper between the years that are available on newspapers.com, which we have access to through the Tennessee Electronic Library. That goes up to 1963, and then we have microfilm that goes up to till it starts in 2007 online. So our highest priority collections, I've talked about our local things, yearbooks, city directories, maps, minutes. One other significant thing is the history of Virginia Intermont College, which was a college starting in 1899. And it's about half a mile north of the library in downtown. But on December, it closed in 2014. And on December 20th of last year, a fire completely destroyed 5 of the main buildings. It had been sold to a Chinese company. They were going to try to do a business college there. COVID happened. That just never worked out. I guess this is close to my heart because my husband worked there the last 3 years that they were open. We lived right across the street from it. So the buildings have gone, most of them are gone now. But right now the community is trying to come together to preserve the legacy. So the library wants to be a part of that, and we will offer all of our resources. Okay, I see I've been talking for 18 minutes, so I'm going to try to speed it up. Metadata, we are definitely still in progress. I am trying to standardize the collection as local history things are being scanned. I am using descriptive metadata in the titles, but we are definitely not up to the standards I would like to be. One good thing is I did get a digital preservation policy written, approved by the board, and I was very excited about this. So it was approved in October. and we have some guidelines, which is awesome. Our current issues and challenges, as with most places, not enough people, not enough money, and not always enough IT support. So I am the primary person still working on digital preservation. I do have a couple of willing coworkers who have helped me with things, and they're all awesome. But the library does not have a budget line dedicated to digital preservation. Going to keep working on that. The fact that we do not have the IT support in-house, it has been a continuing problem, and neither I nor any of the library staff at any level have been able to overcome that yet, but we're working on it. So my goals and implementation, defining the scope of the digital collection, getting a TSLA grant, having the clean machine, having a scanner. These are just some of the things I've been able to accomplish this year, and I'm so happy. Hire a part-time archivist with grant funding. We actually have done that this year, or this week, and she's going to start next week. I'm very excited because she has a lot of archival museum experience and an MLS. So we are thrilled to be able to work with her. We want to continue to network with our community organizations, such as the Birthplace of Country Music Museum and the Bristol Historical Association. Still goals, things I'm not done with. We do need more external hard drives to be able to have one more physical backup. Documenting access permissions to the digital collections. You know, we know who's supposed to be able to mess with the files and not, but there's nothing in place to stop somebody else from doing it. I have begun the creating checksums using Droid, but that is still in progress. Metadata, I mentioned that already. We're still working on capturing that. One idea I got from Joyce, one of her projects, is they are digitizing funeral home records. We are hoping to be able to do that. And of course, my goal is to have a better relationship with IT and repeat the benchmarking exercises. All right, so real quickly, I have appreciated this cohort so much. Danielle has been beyond helpful, and Joyce has as well. The tools we were provided, these assessments were invaluable. I absolutely was scared to death and intimidated by them at the beginning, but we took it in stride, and they were very helpful. I will just briefly look at those NDSA levels, look at all that red. Most of those, we were in the red. We have not moved a lot, but we're definitely making progress. The DPC RAM, I rated us at, we had an awareness in most of these all of these organizational capabilities, and I would like to have a target level of basic and managed in some cases. We're not quite there, but we are definitely making progress. And then in the service capabilities, I found that we had minimal awareness of the technical things that needed to be done. But some awareness, and we definitely are working on that. And I loved having this tool with the what needs to be in place to get there. So these helped me create my goals. The NEDCC peer assessment with Joyce from Cambria County was really, really awesome. We did spend as much time as we could talking, and as we answered the questions about our own institutions, procedures, and challenges, we definitely learned from each other and learned about other resources we could possibly use and where we were lacking, what we needed to do to improve our own practices. Our libraries and communities have a lot of similarities, and we face many of the same challenges. So that is what I really loved, though. We had gathered the information from our POWRR plans, and the fact that this program builds one thing upon another was really helpful to me. So again, really working on the integrity of our digital assets. I am I'm working on that. I feel much more confident, even though I don't know everything. I never will know everything. But hey, to continued improvement, and hopefully everything will go well. I very much appreciate everything everyone has done here. And then there's just my contact information. All right.
Thank you so much, Kristin. That was really thorough. And yeah, I think just fully shows the scope of the materials you have that have been entrusted to you, the scope of all your work, including taking care of that adorable cat. And yeah, and particular challenges with working with IT offsite. That's a huge challenge that is very common amongst smaller institutions. So thank you for that eye-opening experience. Next, I'm going to pass it off to Kristin's partner for this in the cohort, Joyce Homan. So Joyce, if you are ready, pass it over to you. Maybe she hears me or she had to step away, maybe, I don't know. Joyce, are you ready or? She might have had to step away. This is the nature of public libraries. So
Danielle.
Lisa, oh yes.
Sorry, she had to rejoin the room, so I just admitted
okay.
her. So
Okay.
she should be back now.
Okay. Well, in that case, we can let her get settled. Lisa, do you maybe want to kick off this next round for us? Oh wait,
Sure.
Joyce.
Oh,
you're here.
she's back.
Are you ready to?
Yeah. I got so excited and I was trying to tell Kristin that she did a great job and I knocked myself out of the room. So probably not the person who should be doing digital preservation. So
It's perfect. All right, well, go ahead.
You.
Take it away,
I
Joyce.
appreciate that. Thank you very much. Here, let me share my screen with you. Y'all, I'm sorry it's not letting me share. If you bear with me just 1 second, I'll be right there.
And for those, while she's getting settled, as we try to be really mindful of the cohort pairing, and it was really fun to see Joyce and Kristin get together, especially because they both have genealogy collections. And there's me twice. Look at that. I think you had another screen there, Joyce.
Here, let me try that again.
Yeah. But it was really particularly fun to see how, like, their commonalities in the collections and their day-to-day work as well. So
okay. There we go. I think
perfect.
that's it.
Yes, that's the one.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you all so much. Okay. Good to go?
You're great. Go ahead.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you all so much. My name is Joyce Homan. I'm the head of reference at the Cambria County Library, and it was a true pleasure to be part of this cohort. Thank you, Danielle, for everything. All my cohort people, especially Kristin. As Danielle was saying, Kristin and I share local history and genealogy background, and it was just amazing to talk to someone who had the same, very similar digital preservation challenges, working with the unique quirks of genealogy and local history. So I'm very grateful for that. Just a little bit about our library. So this is us, old and new. Okay, I'm so sorry, you guys. I'm going like a mile a minute and I jumped through a couple slides, but you know what? I'm going to just stop there and say we are one of 29 district library centers in Pennsylvania. We encompass Indiana, Somerset, and Cambria County. You can see us there in the western part of the state. Our library was formed in 1877. We're located in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. So if you're familiar with our claim to fame, I guess I would say it like that, is 3 floods that we have had, 1889, 1936, and 1977. We hope that's the last. But we're also known a lot for iron and steel and mines as well. There's a lot of industrial history here, and the library, when it was formed, was funded by the Cambria Iron Company. So it was damaged in the 1889 flood and got rebuilt by Andrew Carnegie himself. He funded that operation. And then a new library was built in 1973, and we moved to our current location. And our mission is to educate, entertain, and empower. Some more about just general information about us. We, of course, are a public library. We're part of a federated system. So we've got 14 independent ones in our county. So we have a loose relationship with them. I would say that we are kind of like the mom library, I guess, for lack of a better word, that when these smaller independent libraries need something, they will often turn to us for genealogy help, sometimes for preservation help. So it felt really important to be part of POWRR for that too, because not only was this information going to benefit our library, but it was also had its ripples out into our other library communities who have less resources even than we do. So we're grateful for that. Our library is overseen by an executive director. We have an operations manager and a board of 9, a couple department heads, and I'm the head of reference. And we have about 25 staff plus volunteers. And then our department has 4 staff and 6 volunteers. And our budget for 2025 is about $2 million. To tell you a little bit about our preservation team, it's not very big. The reference department is really responsible for all preservation efforts of our digitized and board and digital content. So it's myself, a pretty techie reference librarian who works on this part-time, and then the volunteers who do a few hours per week. So, we really, as Danielle and others have said, we just don't have a lot of time to devote because we're still running a reference department and being on the desk and helping people, but it's very important to us. So we're very mindful. We've got a 1-person IT department with backup, uploading files to our website, and someone else in admin who kind of helps out with that. I'll talk a little bit more about that during the challenges part. And then but I am excited to say we've recently launched a tech committee, and they're going to help us and are helping us review suggested policies and procedures, helping us maximize our efforts. So that was that was timely that it kind of happened during this cohort. Here's our equipment, kind of similar to pictures other people have shown. You can see on the left, that's my baby right there, the ST imaging microfilm digitizing machine. The microfilm that was filmed for us, and I'll talk about our collections in a little bit, but some of the earlier stuff, if you have microfilm, it might be similar. The quality is not always the best. Certainly it has improved over the years, but this machine is able to really just sharpen it and make it beautiful. And it's on loan to us from our state support HSLC. So we're grateful for that. And then, as Kristin mentioned, we've got on the right the scissor scanner. We've got flatbed scanners, VCR, CD, and tape conversion machines. Pretty typical, I think, for folks that are digitizing. So that's our setup for right now. Here is a bit of our collections. These are all things that are either somewhat digitized, some of them are born digital, and some of them, of course, we are working on them. So you can just kind of see the overview. I'll keep it short with that, but you can see everything we're working on. Definitely a lot of genealogy and local history things, but also including our board minutes. And then, just fun things about the library. We have someone really created a treasure trove of library history itself, and we have a lot of clippings and pamphlets and ephemera, and so that's been really fun as well. And then I got to give a shout out to the genealogy indexes because those were created by our volunteers, and I'll show you in a picture what those are like. So these are collections that are hosted on our website currently. Most of them, I would say, if not all, were created by volunteers. And being a genealogist, I do a lot of genealogy and library tourism. And I have to say, places that I have been to, it can be hit or miss about whether or not they have indexes to make resources more findable. So I'm very proud of this collection. And, some of this obviously is born digital. So we host those on our website. And then the other location that we have is POWRR Library. I was very interested to talk to Kristin and hear other states, how they sort of, I believe Amber sort of alluded to this, that, there's generally now a state repository that has local history and genealogy resources, and ours is called POWRR Library, specifically PA photos and docs. And so right now we have 3 collections up there of yearbooks, which is pretty extensive, history books that are out of copyright that we've been able to digitize, and then postcards as well that are out of copyright. And so those are fun collections. And it's we actually, when I took the assessments, and I'll talk about that a little bit more, but when I took the assessments, we came out a little higher than I think we normally would have because of the requirements for metadata for PA photos and docs, and just some of the other things that they have set up that they've sort of baked in those checks and balances. And I'm grateful for them as well. We're lucky to be a part of that as well. And then these are the scans that aren't hosted anywhere yet. We, as I said, with our microfilm scanner, we are making these images, and you can see that's from the very first collection from 1853. And not the best quality, of course. I shrunk that down for the presentation, but it's pretty great. And so we're excited to be able to get that up online. And this cohort and doing POWRR was huge in helping move that forward. Some of our current challenges, we do have IT staff changes. We had a person who worked for us, and then he was with us no longer. And so then we had a situation like with Kristin where we had outsourcing to a tech group, and now we have a new IT person again. But we're trying not to bombard him and, help him get up and running. So again, that happened all during the cohort. And that was a little bit of a challenge because it was sort of changing and morphing with the connection as things changed. So we did discover that we had some very outdated infrastructure. And so our tech committee is working with that. That's a huge priority. And then competing priorities in terms of, am I on the reference desk today? Does the patron need me? That kind of thing. And our staff and volunteers as well dealing with those. The microfilm digitization project is very extensive. We've got a lot of decisions yet to be made. The fact that that microfilm goes back to 1853, I said, before I leave this earth, I'm going to make sure that that microfilm is up online and that it's accessible and OCR or whatever new technology comes down the pike for our patrons and genealogists. So it's an exciting project, but it is daunting, especially when we don't have a lot of help. So we're working on that. And then, of course, as everyone said, lack of funds and staffing to devote towards preservation. So why POWRR? It seemed like a natural fit for me whenever our contact who works at PA Photos and Docs, HSLC, said, hey, I think you might be interested in this. Would you want to check it out? And it just sounded great because I felt like I had the desire and the passion, but not all of the skills. I did, when I went to Drexel, focus somewhat on archival preservation, digital preservation, but I felt like a lot had happened since I graduated, and I just needed some tools and skills, and of course the support. That is absolutely without question the hugest help. So I'm grateful that all those things POWRR brought in, and I didn't know how great it was going to be when I applied. So I'm grateful for that. Just briefly, here's my DPC RAM assessment. Again, I said, I think I ranked myself a little bit higher, our institution, because of the connection that we have with PA Photos and Docs. But even with that, you can see that some of the levels, we just truly had an awareness. I recognized that we were pretty basic in where we were at with certain things. Certainly, I would say like in the areas of integrity and fixity, and I think Kristin mentioned this too, very, very minimal knowledge. So that has been a huge help to me to understand just, how do you make sure that the integrity of your information is preserved and that you're not going to lose things. And that's very huge. We got a long way to go, but we are there. Getting there, I should say. This is my NDSA. I actually could not find my original one. I'm not sure I ever saved it. So I took it again last night, and I was very happy to see the progress because I would say most of this was red when I first did it. And now you can see some yellow. So definitely from a storage perspective, we have improved our storage. We've got lots of copies now, those backups, thinking of, offsite preservation to make sure that in case of any horrible situations. And also with control and content, I feel like we have made some great strides. So that makes me really happy. And I look forward to seeing those numbers change and grow. And then my POWRR peer assessment, of course, I've mentioned Kristin several times, and I am so, so grateful for her. There's really nothing to be said for somebody. Genealogists are a unique, sometimes weird lot, and but we love each other and we get each other. And I just knew when I first started talking to her, she understood the way our unique challenges. And then also we are very different in our libraries in some ways too, and what those were. And that was super helpful. She was always willing to look at my stuff, make comments, the actual peer assessment. We just had a really great time talking and sort of getting an understanding of where each other were. And I'm very grateful for that. Okay, wrapping it up, these are the goals and implementation. So we've got some completed goals, which I'm super excited about, and then also some future goals. It really, really makes me happy that we implemented an agreement with Danielle and Kristin's help, creating an agreement for people who give us records to digitize so that they can sign that, and that's all kosher. A digital preservation policy that's submitted to our board for review, which feels important because we want to make that space in our library for the importance of digital preservation. Our multiple backup storage locations, which I mentioned before, we bought a terabyte external drive for the newspaper scans, and that's terrific. And then we are backing that up other places. And then Danielle was very, very helpful to help us consider getting an intern for digital preservation, and we're working on that, and I'm going to get somebody from our community college. So I feel like that's a lot that we achieved, especially when we are not in archives, when we're only have part-time to work on these things, that makes me really happy. And then of course we have future goals, working with the tech committee and IT more closely on planning and procedures, using these assessments as a guide. Now we have a framework to, I didn't even have words for the things that I knew we weren't doing. And so to be able to look back at those and say, okay, here's where we need to concentrate, and we're making a plan. And then also for 2026, hopefully we're going to have a line item for preservation. It's definitely a conversation I've had with our director, and we're moving forward with that. And then that's a big one, trying to figure out where are we hosting the newspaper scans and that, but I'm excited to explore that as well. And then we're in the process of strategic planning. That all sort of happened while we were doing the cohort. And I want to make sure that that is definitely baked into the strategic plan as well. So future things to work on, things that we've completed. I'm very grateful for all of it. And thank you to my cohort and Danielle and Kristin, especially, for all your help. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Joyce. That was really wonderful. All right, we have just one more presentation today, and that's Lisa Geiger. Again, I mentioned Lisa did have a cohort here, but had to, due to circumstances that happened at her job, had to drop out kind of partway through it. So, but Lisa was very resilient, asking questions, and also works at a really cool place. So take it away, Lisa.
Thank you, guys. And while I get my screen shared, I just want to also echo everyone else's comments about how helpful and inviting and welcoming everybody was, and how easy it was to ask questions, not just of our cohort, but also through the Slack channel, and kind of drawing on a wider range of knowledge that was out there was really great, and made me feel a little bit less alone when I was kind of struggling through a lot of these big questions. So my name is Lisa Geiger. I'm the digital collections specialist at the Mütter Museum and Historical Medical Library, which is housed in the College of Physicians of Philadelphia. And I also work in a shared workspace, so apologies if you hear there's frequently conversation and group chatting happening in the hallway behind me. So hopefully we are not sharing our presentation with everyone right now. So our institution is quite old. Our institution was founded in 1787 as the College of Physicians of Philadelphia, not as a degree granting institution, but as a collegiate organization for medical professionals to share information with each other, to present case studies, and to help in the training of new doctors, at least at the time, especially doctors, and that broadened out to more wide-ranging field of medicine. As you can imagine, at the time, They started their library collections quite early because that was one of the sole resources for training at the time. So our library collections date back to 1788. And by 1849, the institution had began pathology collection, which is kind of morphed into the museum collection. That's representing, at this point now, almost 6,000 individuals whose human remains or parts of their human remains have been preserved. But that also extends to things like artifacts and elements of the history of medicine. So initially, our institution served doctors in training, nurses in training, medical professionals. And up through about the 1970s, this was primarily an institution that was focused on sharing knowledge within the medical community. And in the 1970s is when the museum really started leveraging itself as a public space. And some folks might have heard of the Mütter Museum. I think regionally it's pretty well known. But the overarching organization is much larger. So we are currently a collections and research department, whereas previously, for about 200 years, I suppose, our institution had really separated its library and archives wing from its museum department wing. So in the 1800s and the 1900s, this library was servicing so many different medical schools in Philadelphia, and the staff of the library, we are told, rose into the dozens of people, including library specialists and pages, whereas the museum was sort of a run by interested doctors, maybe one or two people kind of keeping that together. Within the last 2 years, we have kind of merged those departments into 8 full-time staff. And I am the first staff member who was hired about 3 years ago, who kind of officially bridges those library and museum departments. So a little bit of statistic-y stuff about our institution. The library holds over 350,000 volumes, books dating back to the 1700s, as well as a smaller group of collections, more special collection-y items like incunabula, rare books and manuscripts. The archives themselves house 4,200 linear feet surrounding the history of medicine in Philadelphia, but also the institutional history of the College of Physicians. And right now that encompasses about 340 gigabytes of digital facsimiles made of some of those materials, but also board digital accessions. The museum itself, as I mentioned, has artifacts and specimens. We have about 35,000 objects, and we have about 70 gigabytes of digital pieces of information. That's also born digital accessions, but mostly photo facsimiles of the material that is in the museum collections. We're run by an executive director. We have a president and CEO, but we're also a little bit unusual in that ultimately we're governed by a board of trustees who are elected from the college fellowship. So the folks who run and make decisions about a lot of the initiatives that the institution takes on are doctors themselves, and maybe not people with as much of a specialty in outward facing service or library and information themselves. Just a note too, while our institution, the museum, is widely known for displays of human remains, I just want to make sure to flag that I did not include any images of human remains in this talk. I just like to make people aware that they are not going to be surprised by something that might be discomforting to some. But here's a little bit of a peek into our collections themselves. On the left is our library stacks, which is 7 floors of library and archive material. It also has a glass floor, which is very cool and very strange, and was built about 130 years ago. So it's even the stacks are very weird and old. Our reading room, which is also a little bit of an exhibit space for the library and archive collections. And then a just tiny hint of the museum collections themselves on the right. So I came into this institution and into this digital POWRR process at a really transitional time for our departments, notably because, as I mentioned, the library had formerly been governed by a pretty large staff who were responding to a lot of in-person research requests. And those needs really changed at the end of the 20th century as people started doing research and learning at their own, like hospital institutional resources, but also as the internet became, the main source of information for people who are studying the medical field. So the library staff really dropped quite a bit, and during COVID, there was essentially only one staff member of the library who weathered the transition of COVID uncertainty. So a lot of information gathering was part of this process for me, especially as somebody who kind of came into the institution just without a lot of breadcrumbs into what had happened here historically, where people were generating and storing digital pieces of data, what previous and current workflows looked like. So the first goals for myself were really to gain intellectual control over our digital materials and our storage locations to really understand what are the digital files that we have, what do we think we'll have in the near future, and also to understand better, like what our architecture really looks like. Where have people been saving things? Where should they be saving things? What are the backup capabilities of those spaces? And also to get a handle on what criteria we should use to decide what materials are really worthy of preservation versus what are things that don't really qualify for this level of care. We wanted to establish workflows to collect basic preservation metadata. And while I knew initially there was ADAMS somewhere that someone was calling ADAMS, I was like, okay, well, let's just make sure that's something that's backed up and is not just somebody's hard drive somewhere. So a lot of this time in this process was spent literally just like digging through spaces in this building and digging through digital spaces to discover that we could whittle down the material that we have into a couple of categories that helped like me feel a little bit more confident in making decisions once I was able to put things in these buckets. And apologies if this is like super detailed information, but I kind of like when I see people's work study, like case studies that break things down into like the specifics that they're working with. So for us, we have a lot of things that are like short or fragmented in-house facsimiles of things that are created often to fill like a remote research request, like somebody wants 2 pages from this book scanned or an image from this book. But we also have complete facsimiles of works that we create in-house, like an entire letter might be scanned, an entire book of special interest might be scanned and digitized in a high quality format. We also have complete facsimiles that were created by outside vendors. So we have a lot of material that over time might have had like a grant fund that was a small amount of money to preserve this one resource that was like an elephant folio, or a book that was in really poor conservation state and needed to go offsite for a little like TLC, but in that process, they generated digital files around it, as well as things like AV files of like previously digitized reel-to-reel tapes. We also have born digital components of accessions that are made to both the library and the museum collection, which have been kind of tracked and managed separately over time. Thankfully, we have far fewer of those things that I think some of the folks that are in this cohort have, where we're really kind of looking back to how to preserve things that we have than like rapidly gaining new born digital accessions. And we also noted that how many 3D museum artifacts and like library archival ephemera had high quality photographs that were really essential to helping us retain information about those objects. So just like this is just super quick snaps of the types of things that we have. Top left is a letter from 1760s from Benjamin Rush. The top right is a commonplace book or receipt book from the 1800s that a woman in Pennsylvania and her daughters assembled of different like receipt book in sense of like medical instructions for home care. Bottom left is some pills from the 1830s that are in the museum collection. And the bottom right is one of a series of real and manufactured eggs that are wax models that show the entire course of chicken egg gestation. A thing that I found in a box one day that we had to make digital facsimiles of. And what I found after doing a lot of this kind of like forensic work was that we had a couple of buckets of places where we were putting things. We have a Microsoft Cloud environment where all of our active work files are going. We have the server that literally has a sticker on it that says DAMS that I was able to locate physically. It took until last week to locate it physically in this building, that has born digital accession library material, high quality scans of mostly of library material, but is like one of those Synology web-enabled servers that is backing itself up. Hooray. We have a secondary server where the museum has been storing objects of high quality photos of objects. We have space on the Internet Archive where we have been storing frequently queried college publications, so historic publications that we would print and develop in-house have been like collected and put on that as a more publicly accessible resource. I also found that we have a whole bunch of Amazon Web Server spaces that we are using to run our archive space environment, that we're using to share digital exhibits using our facsimiles. And I also, the big aha moment for me in this process was the tools that we talked about here and some of the different resources that we used to do self-assessments and things like that. I started recognizing some of those acronyms in our old abandoned digital files to discover that in 2018 through 2020, 2 previous library employees had developed, pitched, received funding for, and implemented an entire digital preservation system. They had a server dedicated to it. They had a complicated process using now defunct open source software to transfer it periodically onto these beautiful Glacier servers that were putting things in deep storage. And then COVID hit. Those 2 staff members left the institution. They didn't fully track what that process looked like. And then we had a water event that poured water onto that server, and the Glacier server survives, but the hardware that they worked so hard to implement and the workflow that they worked so hard to implement died, along with so many other things in our hearts during COVID. So this is a snapshot of just like the things that I found myself looking at constantly. Things like this DAMS hard drive that was filled with mold, that it had waterfall event destroy it. Quite sad. Me staring at the AWS web server space for hours and hours and hours this year to understand what any of this means, because I am not a person who came into this process with any knowledge of how any of these servers worked. And then the snap that I took last week, where I found our DAM servers that our IT department kept just telling me it's in the building somewhere. Don't worry, it's web enabled. I was able to get them to sit down and show me where it was. Hooray. So now I know where it is. It's not where the water fell on the previous one, which was my #1 thing I wanted to ensure. We're only in goal 2. Don't worry, we're going to get through fast. We wanted to establish criteria for preservation. And this is where Danielle was just so helpful in helping me think through how important it was for us to define our digital collections, because we have so much of this big extent of material. She was really helpful in helping me create a document for ourselves internally that can call a digital collection something that we want to preserve, and then talk about what that digital collection is, not only as just accessioned material into the collection, but to also extend that definition to things that were really important and critical to our work processes. So those high quality photographs of museum objects, those should be preserved, because if we lose some of those, we risk losing provenance information, for example, about some of our collections items. This is also a document that I've already been able to point to in some of our discussions about prioritizing different things for digitization that are currently in analog format, because we were able to really better assess in-house what we have the capability to work with versus what really is more suitable for an outside contractor project. We also were able to develop a digital preservation policy. Hooray. We were able to throw in a lot of the standards that we developed after the DPC, the RAM assessment, and talk about a lot of these recommendations. Talk about our OAIS as a reference model to recommend some of our basic level formatting, and especially to define roles and responsibilities for folks at the institution. So if we do have staff that transitions in the future, this document should be a place that they can come back to and understand who is responsible for what. We were able to also tweak our workflow a little bit with the help of this updated digitization station that we used our funding for, our digital POWRR funds for. We found that we had this incredible book eye scanner, but people were so disinclined to use it because the tower that it was running off of would take like 10 minutes to turn on. So people were trying to digitize stuff like at their desk or with their phone, and then putting those digital files in improper places. Now this actually works better and turns on in 30 seconds, and people have already started using it. We have fulfilled research requests with it. We have a whole workflow that is ingesting things a little bit better than we were before. The whole process was a little bit delayed because, like everyone else, our IT department is also understaffed and underworked and has had a lot of trouble kind of catching up to where we are in this digital POWRR program. We still have things to do with it. I'm testing using some different software to better add like a bagging metadata capture step rather than us kind of just writing into text files within our preservation and our use copies that are coming off of this machine. But we've got a system that works for us now and is going to our DAM server. And about that secondary backup for our DAM server, literally just had a conversation with our IT department yesterday where like we had an aha moment and they realized what I was talking about when I was trying to explain to them that just backing up every day and keeping a 3-week window of backups is a different set of it doesn't necessarily solve our problem of how do we ensure that what we're backing up is not corrupted. So they said, oh, we understand what you're talking about. There's an entire snapshot option that we can use that runs checksums against a secondary server that's already available for this process. And boom, our brains all exploded and we thought, great, it could cost us $200 and it's just under the amount that anyone will ask us questions about. So we think we're moving forward with that. Yeah, so that's a little bit of to-doing. We have the bagging software that I'm working through. I have some bigger questions to answer for myself about deprecating that AWS Glacier, making sure that I can pull those files off of that place and retain them now that we have, we know that they come from a mold-infested RIP DAM server. We also know that we need to review those 2 policy documents that we came up with. We've chosen 3 years as a benchmark for ourselves. And I would say that some of the biggest challenges have included like learning to live with good enough. I think it was a really useful experience for me to find all of these breadcrumbs about the former preservation process that had been worked through and abandoned here, and realize that we couldn't aim for best because we don't necessarily have the staff or the capabilities to sustain that kind of system. We can live with good enough, and that is a very safe place for us to be, rather than a system where one person leaves and their documentation doesn't prove successful at maintaining that process. The other biggest process I've complained about a few times was just like choosing software. It keeps driving me crazy how every time I try to pick something new out of like the ether, it's like our system is deprecated, our support has ended, we don't work on Windows, we don't work on this. And just that process, I think, is going to continue to be a little bit of a time sink, and we're going to have to just like lean on each other's expertise to work through that. But that's another learning to live with good enough lesson for myself. So that's what I have for everybody. I also want to make sure that I note that my pair, Bianca, was also really helpful in helping us like talk through some of these questions, even though we found our institutions to be at like really different places before her journey through this process got interrupted. It was just really helpful to have a secondary set of person to help you kind of digest your thoughts as you were saying them, but also find different solutions that we hadn't thought of for each other. So I'm very thankful for her assistance here too.
Excuse me. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lisa. Yes, as as Stacey said in the chat, we are a smidge over time, but I think it's just this group was so passionate and so excited to learn that like they just didn't want to stop talking about it. So it's really wonderful to see. But if anyone has any questions or comments, we have probably about 5 minutes or so. for anyone who would like to jump in.
I can ask a question while we wait for
Yes.
any other possible questions. And I think you guys really hit upon, like how the assessments really informed your work and how it enabled you to get like a lot of stuff done. But I'm curious, like if you have any sort of thoughts on, since you all do represent smaller organizations, like really small, did you find that the tools like are lacking in a specific area, or I guess in terms of thinking, like there are some things that aren't as applicable to the smaller organizations. So if you have any thoughts on that, we'd love to hear that.
I mean, I'm happy to kick that off unless there's somebody else who wants to go first. Cool.
Go for it.
I think kind of like what I'd said, the business case toolkit, and nothing in specific other than that, but some stuff was just, I remember a number of our meetings, like there would be portions of stuff we'd work on and we're just like, oh, that's too big. Like we don't have that information. I can't fill that out. There's nobody to take that to. But all of that, like, it was easy not to focus on that because Danielle did such a good job of like redirecting to things that were more applicable. And there was still plenty pieces of everything that we could work on. But even the DPC RAM, some of it is like, as much as I love that assessment, there was just like, I can't even begin to evaluate that. I don't have access to that information. I went to go interview my business office and she's like, yeah, no, we don't have budgets. Sorry, I can't give you that information. I was just like, oh, no one knows it. It's not just that I don't know it. No one in this tiny library has that information. Okay, I'm just going to scratch that box out. It's fine. So more stuff like that. Like it's just there are things that we couldn't use. Nothing necessarily negative affecting, but just things that we couldn't use.
Sara, did you have something you wanted to chime in with, or?
No, it was basically the same thing that Amber said. Yeah.
I mean, I'll chime in just to say that like some people had legacy tools to say, oh, we should look at Big Curator, and it's like, well, actually, maybe not. There's no very known tools that people automatically think of. So we wanted to make sure that the group was mindful that like just because it works somewhere else and you see it everywhere, it doesn't mean that we have to focus on it.
And I will say that getting the permission to ignore Bit Curator was a little bit of a turning point for me to be able to focus on smaller bites that are actually making a difference where we are. So thank you again for telling me to ignore Bit Curator.
Sometimes you just need that permission, right? Or encouragement. Thank you, Snowden, for your comment in the chat, and thanks for coming to all those showcases.
I can't say enough how much this affirms all of the experiences I've had in over 20 years of working in this field, that like it's hard, it continues to be hard, but the thing that makes it doable is sharing information, having a network of peer supporters and mentors, and just this community of practice is so important to accomplishing the hard work that we all have to do. So thank you for sharing your experiences, warts and all, and little victories like finding the damn server, like we know it's here. Like this is all just really echoing my own experiences, and it's just, yeah, it's so reassuring. Thank you so much, all of you. And thanks to the Digital POWRR folks for doing all the great work that they do.
This is why we do it, right? Like you guys are seriously amazing, and we're really proud of like all the progress you've made, because you made a lot. So I'm really looking forward to your case studies and seeing where you go from here.
I'm gonna miss them. They were just such a delight. It was such a delight. Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess since we don't have any other questions, we'll go ahead and dismiss. And thanks everybody for coming. We appreciate it. Bye-bye.